Beneath the noise of history, there are corridors where the air still smells of ink and iron, where locked drawers hold maps that never matched the world we were shown. These are the rooms without windows, where the truth was bound in paper and sealed in silence. Step inside, and the doors close behind you. What you find here is not in any textbook, because some knowledge was buried, not to be forgotten, but to be protected from us. At 3:40 hours on April 28, 1945, 3 days before Hitler's suicide, a convoy of 8 heavy trucks and 2 KFZ 251 half-tracks rolled out from a concealed depot north of Dresden. The column, identified in surviving Wehrmacht orders as Colonne Eisensturm, was under the direct authority of Generalleutnant Hans Kramer of the Reich Ministry for Armaments. Its official manifest listed industrial tools and machine parts for relocation. However, an intercepted Luftwaffe Enigma transmission, later decrypted by Allied cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park, referred to V-7 elements, special uranium cargo, and an airfield south of the border. Witness accounts from civilians in the Ore Mountains described the convoy traveling at night with all lights blacked out, escorted by armed SS men in field gray without rank insignia. One farmer from Teplitsa later testified to Soviet NKVD interrogators that he saw long cylinders under tarpaulins, guarded like gold. Hours after passing into the Sudetenland, the convoy disappeared from all known tracking. In 1946, the British War Office compiled a classified dossier, WO/ES 1946 of 221, on the disappearance. According to the report, fragments of burnt truck frames were found in a mountain pass near Kraslis. Yet no human remains were recovered, and several tires showed signs of being deliberately slashed, suggesting sabotage or a staged abandonment. A single crate lid, charred but legible, bore the serial number AG 443 URX, matching a component designation for an experimental turbine housing seized months earlier from Heinkel's Rostock facility. By 1952, Cold War intelligence agencies on both sides of the Iron Curtain had developed competing theories. The CIA's Special Activities Division believed Eisensturm's cargo reached a clandestine airstrip in the Bavarian Alps, where it was flown to Spain aboard a Ju-390, an ultra-long-range aircraft whose existence the Luftwaffe had denied at Nuremberg. The Soviets, drawing on files from the captured German Foreign Office, suspected the material was delivered to Objekt Blau, a post-war Soviet-German research site outside Novosibirsk. A breakthrough appeared possible in 1962, when GCHQ declassified portions of a 17-year-old intercept marked Top Secret, Eyes Only. In it, an SIS officer, Hargreaves, wrote to the Foreign Office. * cargo confirmed airborne, not in Soviet hands. Destination unknown. French have fragments of wing spar. * The wing spar reference was troubling. French Air Force archives contained a single notation of such a part, recovered from a smuggler's cache in Marseille in late 1946. It was composed of an aluminum-magnesium alloy not used in any known Allied or Axis aircraft. The convoy's commanding officer, Oberstleutnant Ernst Volkmann, was never found among the war dead. In 1957, a man claiming to be Volkmann was spotted in Buenos Aires by a former British field officer. The sighting was dismissed as mistaken identity, but MI6 surveillance logs from the period remained sealed. By the 1970s, Eisensturm was largely dismissed by official historians as a logistical footnote lost in the chaos of Germany's collapse. Yet in 1984, Polish border guards discovered a rusting steel container in a disused railway siding near Zatek, less than 30 kilometers from the convoy's last confirmed position. Inside were 4 precision-machined turbine blades, each engraved with Reich Sadler inspection marks and an unfamiliar triangular manufacturer's logo. 2 weeks later, the container and its contents were seized by the Czechoslovak State Security, STB, and transferred to an unknown location. The find was never acknowledged in public records. Former East German Stasi archivists have since suggested that Eisensturm was part of a larger Nazi evacuation plan codenamed Führergen, intended to move advanced propulsion research westward before the Soviets could capture it. Some testimonies allege that the cargo included not just hardware but also personnel, engineers and physicists who had been working in isolation at underground facilities near Nordhausen. None of the named individuals were ever located in post-war POW or emigration lists. In 1998, after the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, a Czech historian named Pavel Kriz published a short paper claiming to have seen a partial inventory list from an STB vault. The document allegedly named Model V7/I and Fract UX ERS, with weight and dimension specifications matching turbine test rigs. Within weeks of the paper's release, Kriz was found dead in his Prague apartment under circumstances officially ruled as accidental carbon monoxide poisoning. Today, Eisensturm exists in the historical record as a fragment, an unresolved gap in the closing weeks of the European War. No photographic evidence of the convoy survives, and most paper trails terminate in missing files, sealed boxes, or burned archives. But in a locked storage room of the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz, a metal tag labeled AG 443 URX sits in a plain cardboard box, its edges darkened by fire, a silent relic of a night when a convoy rolled into the mountains and never emerged. On December 9, 1950, with temperatures plunging to -30 and the battle for the Chosin reservoir turning against United Nations forces, a small detachment from the U.S. Army's 7th Infantry Division was ordered to search a hastily abandoned Soviet forward command post near Haggeruri. The team, accompanied by 2 CIA field officers, found the structure frozen and silent, its contents seemingly left in a rush. Beneath a desk in the main radio room, Corporal James Leary pried open a dented metal trunk. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were 12 German-language dossiers bearing the black-on-silver insignia of Abteilung 7, a wartime Nazi division officially dissolved in May 1945. The documents, stamped Geheim and dated between 1943 and 1944, described Operation Nachtglas, a series of experiments involving high-altitude optical reconnaissance platforms, with specific references to orbital frames and equatorial sweep cycles. Included were blueprints for a lens assembly over 2 meters in diameter, annotated with instructions for mounting on Stage 3 projectile bodies. At the time, such a system would have been decades ahead of known engineering capabilities. Each dossier carried a Soviet translation slip, indicating they had been in Red Army possession before the Korean conflict began. Major Robert Crowley, the senior CIA officer on site, ordered immediate evacuation of the materials to Yokota Air Base in Japan. The files were loaded into a wooden crate marked Machine Spares and placed under armed guard. That night, in the dim light of the frozen airstrip, 2 U.S. Marines from Charlie Company were assigned to guard the aircraft. Both were found dead less than 48 hours later in an alleged training accident during a live-fire drill. No autopsy reports survive, and their families later claimed they were buried in sealed caskets. According to a declassified fragment from CIA Far East Division archives, the Nachtglas material reached Yokota but never entered standard cataloging. Instead, it was flown onward under diplomatic cover to Langley, arriving January 2, 1951. Internal memos, later obtained by the Senate Church Committee in 1975, refer obliquely to non-Soviet orbital assets and pre-45 optics yields. One heavily redacted paragraph mentions testing a surviving lens unit at an undisclosed desert range in Nevada, producing images of a moving train at 200 miles, clarity exceeding KH-4 standards. Meanwhile, the Soviets pursued their own line of inquiry. KGB archives declassified in the 1990s revealed that the original Abteilung 7 documents had been recovered from a vault beneath the Reich Ministry for Science in Berlin in May 1945, transferred to Moscow, and selectively studied by TSNII-MASH, the Soviet Aerospace Design Bureau. By late 1949, Soviet engineers had replicated portions of the Nachtglas lens, allegedly integrating the technology into an experimental reconnaissance balloon program. No Soviet satellite launches occurred until 1957, but internal KGB memoranda suggest they were aware of practicable orbital imagery years earlier. The true origins of Operation Nachtglas remain murky. Abteilung 7 was believed to have been under SS oversight, but no surviving organizational charts place it within conventional Wehrmacht structure. Post-war interrogations of captured German scientists revealed scattered references to mirrorbirds and Zeiss codework, yet no one admitted to working directly on an orbital device. Some historians believe Nachtglas was a deception project intended to lure Allied intelligence toward phantom weapons. Others note the suspicious disappearance of two Zeiss Oberkochen optical engineers, Dr. Klaus Hermann and Ing. Dieter Vogel, in April 1945, last seen boarding a Luftwaffe transport at Tempelhof. In 1968, during a closed-door session of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Otis Pike pressed an Air Force witness about the origin of a particular ultra-long focal-length camera used in corona reconnaissance satellites. The transcript, declassified in 2003, records the Air Force general replying, "Portions of that design predate the Air Force itself." No further elaboration appears in the record. By the early 1980s, references to Nachtglas had all but vanished from official channels. Yet in 1987, a retired Lockheed Skunk Works engineer anonymously mailed a black-and-white photograph to the Los Angeles Times. The image, uncaptioned, showed what appeared to be a massive lens assembly in a desert hangar, with German-language safety stencils visible on the mounting brackets. The newspaper declined to publish it, citing national security concerns, after a visit from Defense Department officials. Today, the Nachtglas dossiers are presumed destroyed, misplaced, or hidden under special compartmented access. The only surviving public record is a faint carbon copy of one page, intercepted by an East German Stasi mole in Japan, which depicts a schematic of an orbital path labeled Schwarzlinie 4. Its coordinates describe a sweep over Eastern Europe and the Ural Industrial Belt in late 1944, more than a decade before such trajectories could be achieved. Whether this was engineering foresight, an elaborate bluff, or evidence of a suppressed leap in reconnaissance technology remains one of the Cold War's most tightly held secrets. On March 14, 1954, at 6:15 hours, miners working in the southern galleries of the Wieliczka salt mine, already a labyrinth of chambers carved since the 13th century, broke through a plastered wall into a low, man-made tunnel. Behind it lay a reinforced steel door welded shut from the inside. Local authorities summoned a Polish army engineering team, which, after 12 hours with cutting torches, exposed a small bunker sealed since the war. Faded stencils on the crates inside read, OKW, Streng geheim, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, top secret. The air smelled faintly of oil and dust. The crates contained more than 200 microfilm reels, dozens of meteorological charts, and a series of large-format maps on heavy linen depicting Antarctica's Queen Maud Land in extraordinary detail, coastal outlines, inland mountain ranges, and marked landing zones, all dated between 1938 and 1944. One map bore a handwritten annotation in German, Eisfrei, Operation Schlüsselstein. Several charts carried signatures matching known members of the Kriegsmarine's Hydrographic Office. Within 24 hours, the discovery was relayed to Warsaw, and a joint Polish-Soviet survey team, led by Colonel Alexander Varnin of the Soviet Main Intelligence Directorate, GRU, arrived at the site. Civilian witnesses recall the arrival of unmarked trucks at night, the lowering of crates into covered transport, and the sealing of the gallery with fresh concrete. The official explanation issued to the press was that archival debris of no national importance had been removed for disposal. A declassified Polish military logbook from March 16 records a cryptic radio message from Varnin to Moscow. Asterisk material pertains to Southern naval interest, immediate classification. Advise termination of local reporting. Asterisk surviving miners who had glimpsed the map spoke of ice-free coastal zones and detailed annotations in a grid system unfamiliar to civilian navigation charts. None of them were questioned again. For decades, no official reference to the Wieliczka find appeared in public records. But in 1963, a former GRU cartographer, defecting to the west via Helsinki, told Finnish intelligence that he had personally examined several of the seized maps. He described depictions of inland lakes and geological features under ice cover, later confirmed by international surveys using airborne radar in the late 1950s. He claimed the documents had been transferred to a naval intelligence archive in Leningrad under the codename Objekt Sudlicht. Speculation mounted among Allied analysts about the origin of such precise Antarctic mapping. The most direct explanation pointed to the 1938 to 1939 German Antarctic expedition aboard the Schwabenland, which officially charted parts of Queen Maud Land. Yet the Wieliczka maps were far more extensive, suggesting continued reconnaissance, possibly by submarine-supported seaplane flights, through the war years. Kriegsmarine war diaries, however, show no surviving records of such missions, and the relevant pages from 1942 to 1944 in the U-boat fleet's meteorological logs are conspicuously missing. In 1971, the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, conducted a classified study comparing the Wieliczka map annotations, obtained through an unnamed European intermediary, to satellite imagery of the Antarctic coastline. The study concluded that the positional accuracy of certain features was within modern cartographic tolerances, despite being drafted decades earlier. The ONI report, now partially declassified, ends abruptly with the note, "Further inquiry beyond the scope of current assessment due to source sensitivity." Hints of a wider operational context emerged in the 1980s, when fragments of a German-language journal, Kriegsmarine Forschungsbericht NR 27, surfaced in Argentina. One entry, dated August 14, 1944, mentioned Phase 2 Schlesselstein and the transfer of instrument pods aboard U-977, a submarine whose post-war surrender in Mar del Plata was already a point of Allied suspicion. Argentine naval intelligence denied any connection between the Wieliczka materials and their files on U-977, but an internal memorandum from the same year, later leaked, speculated that the sub had delivered non-standard cargo to an undisclosed southern hemisphere location. The Polish miners who made the original discovery were gradually relocated or reassigned by state authorities in the years following the incident. One, interviewed anonymously in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union, claimed that a Soviet officer warned him never to speak of the ice maps again. He also recalled a separate crate labeled Lichtbilderät, photographic apparatus, being removed under heavy guard. Today, the Wieliczka files remain a missing chapter in wartime cartographic history. The known Antarctic maps of the era do not match their reported precision, and the absence of corresponding Kriegsmarine operational logs leaves a vacuum filled only by conjecture. Whether they were evidence of an ambitious, unrecorded polar project or merely the byproduct of scattered reconnaissance efforts remains unresolved. Somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten naval archive in St. Petersburg, or in an unmarked depot under the Urals, the maps may still exist, rolled and bound in linen, bearing the seal of a regime that vanished but left behind questions frozen in ice. On May 1, 1945, as Germany fractured under Allied advance, a six-man patrol from the British Special Air Service scaled the snow-laden ridges of the Hoher Dachstein in Austria. Their objective, outlined in War Office Directive WO/SO 1945 of 119, was to seize Festung Nebelspitze, a secluded mountaintop installation rumored to house SS command staff and sensitive research material. Intelligence briefings suggested the presence of Waffen-SS Gebirgsjäger, but as the patrol breached the outer perimeter, they found the gates ajar and the compound eerily silent. Inside, laboratories were stripped bare. Benches without instruments, storage racks without samples. Yet the facility's radio room was still powered, its signal logs stacked neatly on the operator's desk. The final entry, time-stamped April 27, 1945, read, "Primary asset evacuated to Wolfshore, awaits submarine extraction." The term Wolfshore was unknown to Allied intelligence, and immediate debriefings failed to connect it to any known Baltic or North Sea port. Among the few items left behind was a manifest for a train shipment originating from Peenemünde 2 weeks earlier, labeled Frachtgut, Gerät K. 31. The classification matched wartime references to experimental radar and guidance systems. Another document, a torn sheet from an SS requisition form, listed oxygen tanks, polar clothing, and C. Funkerat TYP-7 naval radio sets. This combination of items suggested maritime transport of a high-value package, possibly beyond European waters. The SAS patrol reported the site secured by 1420 hours, but before a full engineering survey could be conducted, a sudden order arrived from HQ: withdraw immediately and leave the facility under U.S. 80th Infantry Division control. Within days, American personnel had sealed Nebelspitze and removed all remaining documents. No British access was permitted thereafter. In the years following the war, Wolfshore appeared only once in open records, within a 1946 MI6 memorandum discussing suspected German research assets exfiltrated through neutral territories. The memo, later reclassified and withheld until 1993, hinted that Wolfshore was not a place in Germany at all, but a codename for a restricted MI6 coastal site in Scotland. According to a now-deceased signals officer, the name referred to a stretch of inaccessible shoreline on the Moray Firth, used for clandestine landings during the war. A 1989 defector from East German military intelligence, Oberstleutnant Dieter Meissner, claimed during debriefings in West Berlin that Soviet GRU files contained references to Wolfshore Incident, 1945, describing the covert transfer of an SS scientific team to British custody. The GRU believed the team had been developing a directional guidance platform intended for long-range missile deployment. Meissner alleged that the Soviets were convinced this technology was quietly integrated into early British rocket programs, though no corroborating documentation has surfaced. In 1957, the Royal Navy commissioned a classified inquiry into unusual wartime activity in Scottish coastal waters. Declassified portions of the report confirmed that, on the night of May 3, 1945, a U-boat, later identified as U-3514, was detected approaching the Moray coastline but was neither intercepted nor recorded in public naval logs. The submarine is officially listed as having surrendered at Bergen, Norway, a week later. How it could appear in two places within such a short time remains unexplained. The fate of Festung Nebelspitze itself took an odd turn. After its closure, the installation was dismantled by 1948, and its location omitted from Austrian military maps. In 1972, hikers discovered a partially collapsed tunnel entrance bearing faint traces of the Reichsadler insignia. The area was subsequently fenced off and designated a hazardous geological site by the Austrian government. In the 2000s, a Freedom of Information request in the UK yielded a heavily redacted file labeled WO/OP Wolfshore/45. The surviving lines mention secured transfer of asset, naval extraction successful, and integration under Bluebird Protocol, a security classification tied to joint British-American intelligence projects. The file ends with an instruction: destroy secondary logs, retain no duplicates. Today, Wolfshore remains absent from official cartography, and Nebelspitze exists only in fading photographs taken by an SAS corporal on a personal camera. Images showing empty rooms, scattered paper, and a lone steel crate with its markings carefully scratched away. If the primary asset was indeed removed under British sanction, its nature has never been disclosed. The mountain gave no answers, the shoreline keeps its own. On September 18, 1972, the U.S. Navy salvage vessel USS Trieste II was conducting a covert search operation in the Baltic Sea under the guise of hydrographic surveying when sonar picked up a dense metallic object resting at a depth of 312 feet. Divers, operating under unusually strict radio silence, recovered a corroded steel capsule roughly 2 meters long, its outer shell pitted with impact scars. The object was winched aboard under tarpaulin cover and secured in a sealed hold. Within hours, it was listed in ship's logs not as wreckage, but as material transfer, case file 22 Himmelvogel. The capsule was opened 3 days later at a secure naval facility in Rota, Spain. Inside were tightly rolled strips of degraded AGFA film, each labeled with German technical markings and dated between January and March 1946. Nearly a year after Germany's surrender. The images, painstakingly restored, showed a massive, unmarked aircraft on a snow-covered runway. The Delta Wing design bore no resemblance to known Luftwaffe prototypes. Its scale, inferred from nearby fuel trucks, suggested a wingspan of over 50 meters. Several frames showed Soviet ground crews in winter uniforms, indicating the photographs were taken in territory under Red Army control. The Navy's Naval Intelligence Command ordered immediate classification at the highest level, assigning the codename Himmelvogel, Skybird. A parallel CIA memorandum, declassified only in fragments, warned that the images could not be dismissed as propaganda, noting that certain airframe details matched wind tunnel models seized from Junkers research facilities in 1945. Yet, no official record exists of any such aircraft being constructed or tested post-war. On October 7, 1972, the capsule and film were transferred via C-141 Starlifter to Andrews Air Force Base, then to an undisclosed facility believed to be part of the Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson AFB. The chain of custody log for Case File 22 Himmelvogel ends abruptly there. Freedom of Information Act requests filed in the 1990s were denied, with the Department of the Navy stating no such case number had ever existed. However, in 2011, a German private collector auctioned an aircraft cockpit dial, allegedly recovered from a Baltic shipwreck, which bore both Luftwaffe serial codes and Cyrillic inspection stamps. Photographic comparison by aviation historians suggested the part belonged to no known production aircraft from either German or Soviet inventories. The auction lot was withdrawn without explanation, and the item's current whereabouts remain unknown. The Cold War context added another layer of intrigue. Between 1945 and 1947, Soviet aviation records contain unexplained gaps in their long-range bomber development timeline, coinciding with known Soviet efforts to incorporate captured German jet and rocket designs. Declassified British GCHQ intercepts from early 1946 refer cryptically to northern test flights and airframes beyond existing lift ratios, language that suggests awareness of unconventional aircraft performance. Some historians speculate the Himmelvogel images may depict a joint Soviet-German engineering project conducted in the immediate post-war chaos, using facilities in occupied Eastern Europe. This would not have been without precedent. Operation Osoaviakum in October 1946 forcibly relocated thousands of German specialists to the USSR, where they continued work under Soviet command. But no declassified Soviet documents mention a delta-wing craft of such scale, and Russian state archives deny holding any relevant files. As for the capsule itself, retired Navy personnel have hinted it may not have been lost accidentally. One diver involved in the recovery, interviewed anonymously in 1984, claimed the object was found resting atop an older wreck, possibly the remains of a wartime transport vessel. He further alleged that the capsule's latch mechanism bore fresh tool marks, as if it had been opened and resealed underwater prior to discovery. This would imply the capsule had been deliberately placed, perhaps as a controlled drop for later retrieval. In 2017, a former Defense Intelligence Agency analyst published a memoir in which he claimed to have briefly handled one of the restored Himmelvogel negatives. He described the photographed aircraft as neither German nor Soviet in lineage, but the child of both. His manuscript was withdrawn from publication shortly after release, and subsequent editions omit the relevant chapter entirely. Case File 22 Himmelvogel remains officially non-existent. Yet in a climate-controlled archive in Maryland, an unmarked steel cabinet reportedly holds 3 sealed envelopes, each containing fragments of Agfa film, their emulsion cracked but their images faintly visible under ultraviolet light. In one, the silhouette of the great delta wing looms against a white horizon, its cockpit canopy reflecting a low winter sun. The snow, the shadow, and the silence leave only questions. Who built it, where it flew, and why its memory was buried at the bottom of the Baltic? The official records end where the shadows begin. But the shadows have weight, and the walls remember what the living are not allowed to say. Somewhere, in vaults colder than any battlefield, the evidence waits, quiet, patient, and unforgiving. You may leave now, but the names, the faces, and the coordinates are still out there, sleeping under decades of dust. And history has a way of waking what was meant to stay dead.